It's Robbie Butterfield, and I'm very happy to come out and speak with you today. I entered the Air Force in 1973. I went on the program in 1982 and stayed on the program until 1989. I was lucky, I was a crew chief, and then I went into supervision at RAF Milda Hall.
My name is Stormy Boudreau. I joined the Air Force in 1968. In '82, I got into the SR-71 program, flew it for about a little over 4 years, and had a wonderful time. And be happy to entertain questions later.
Here's a button, thank you. Switchology. Tom Danielson, I flew the airplane from 85 to 88. Started off in the F4s, finished off in the U2 after the SR-71. Stormy flew the U2 as well, but I was proudest to fly the SR-71 with my buddy Stan.
I'm Stan Goodmanson. I'm from southeastern Minnesota. I started out in the service. I spent 2 years in the Navy, in the reserves. I spent 1 year on the Kitty Hawk, and I was attached to a vigilante squadron. After I came in the Air Force, went through navigator training, flew B-52s, FB-111s, and SR-71s. And I was the last active duty commander of the last operational SR-71 unit.
Yeah, my name is Don Campbell, retired Chief Master Sergeant. I was in charge of all the maintenance of the SR-71s, U-2s, T-38s, KC-135s at Beale Air Force Base. I joined the military in 1959, was the first maintenance guy in the SR-71 program in 1964. I stayed with it, retired at 86 from the Air Force, went to work for Lockheed, and quit them in 1990. Went to work for Northrop on a B-2 and retired, stay home, raise tomatoes, and go fishing.
And I'm Bill Burke, and I flew the SR-71 as a pilot because it says so right here. We keep it down there.
So the temperatures that were outside without the airplane flying through are minus 70 degrees or so. But as you go faster, the compression and the friction of flying through the air causes things to heat up. So the aircraft itself warms up to a considerable degree. A couple of the numbers that I remember offhand without having to refer to a document is that the little pie-shaped windows in front of the pilot are about 610 degrees. The side window is about 450 or so. I can tell you that if you take your hand in your big pressure suit with garden glove kind of gloves on, and you put your hand on the window, you can do that for about 2 seconds. And then you're taking your hand off and you're trying to get your hand away from that glove to cool it off because it is really hot. But if I didn't do that, I'm fairly comfortable in the cockpit. But the problem is, when they were building the airplane and realizing they were going to generate this much heat, almost everything about the airplane, to include the metal that it was made out of, was oriented around being able to survive in that heat. In that time period, the highest temperature oil could only handle about 180 degrees. The highest temperature hydraulic fluid could only handle about 250 degrees. And we were expecting the temperatures for the oil to be nearly 800 degrees at times, and the temperatures for the hydraulics to be in that same general area, which would have just burnt it would look like the bottom of your frying pan after you've fried something, that kind of residue that gets on there, coating the bottom of it. And so everything about the airplane was dependent upon solving the heat problem, either making us cooler, and the systems that they created are still used today. It's called a thermal management system, created in the SR, A12 to SR, where they used the fuel system as the heat sink to be able to cool off the various components, to include my little pink body. And that's even used today in the F-22 and the F-35 is how they cool those aircraft. You can see some of those other things that they're talking about there. I didn't bother to read them because you can read better than I can. And as that sign says, you want to go to that? If I took up all your time?
No, you did good. So as you'll see, as we continue to talk about the airplane, they had to start from scratch. All the rivets, all the oil, how the metallurgy, titanium. This is about an 88% is titanium of this aircraft. A little side note is we didn't have enough titanium to build this. So the CIA set up some dummy companies because we knew Russia had a ton of it. So they set up some civilian fake companies and put in purchase requests from the Soviet Union. Little did they know we were building this airplane so we could go spy on them. Project Senior Crown was the, at that time, classified nickname for the SR-71 program.
The aircraft is quite unique in the fact that you can't, in most cases, take panels off of one airplane and put on another. Everything is custom fit. We order new panels and things for the airplane. They have to come out. You have to get sheet metal to trim the panels to fit the aircraft. And the production of it was a little bit different. I can't see the picture there, so I'm not sure what it says.
It's the plane with all the parts of the airplane coming together, so assembling the aircraft.
Okay. But they, people in Lockheed, in Burbank, as they were putting this thing together, it was quite unique. It had to be trained on the location of the different items, nomenclatures. It was a pretty good training period for all the people that worked in the plant, and they would put the aircraft together, put it in what we called a coffin, a big trailer with a big box on it. We'd put the aircraft inside the big box, transport it on a highway out for the public, and all I could see was a box. The airplane was inside, and you take it to an unknown location and finish the assembly and put it together. And here's what you have today, a finished airplane.
Thank you. And as you can see from the picture, it was a slow process, and everything, each airplane was handmade, if you will.
50s to early 60s. The best jet engine we had then could only operate an afterburner for about 20 minutes. And then after that, that engine had to be inspected because it had pushed the limits on that airplane right to the edge of the red line. And now they were asking them to create an airplane, an engine for an airplane, that could operate an afterburner continuously. So one of the program managers for the engine had made the statement that every component in the engine, to include cotter pins, were unique and not able to be transferred from the current engines being manufactured. Everything about it was new.
Side of the fuselage and in the nose. We had two nose kinds of essential packages, I should say. One was a camera, objective wire camera, and we could take photographs of 70 miles on either side of the center line for that. The other thing we used there was advanced synthetic aperture radar. So it's a radar system. And that system was sophisticated enough so we could tell the hull numbers of Soviet submarines when we went up against them in the Kola Peninsula and also on in Kamchatka. Behind that are the technical objective cameras of 30-inch focal length or something like that. And they were tied in with the astronavigation system. And so they could rapidly take pictures. You didn't have to manually to manipulate them. It was all done computer-wise. And then the other thing about that is because of the speed that we had, we just the lens just didn't flip open. The head of the camera moved so that to compensate for the speeds that we were flying. And then one other thing that we had carried along with us was the ELIT stuff. We had, we gathered a lot of electronic intelligence data with those systems as well.
Well, pressure zoo was something we never ever worried about because they always worked. In fact, my wife was a supervisor in the pressure suit department. So anyway, I've got a personal stake in that, but we wore the pressure suit every single time we flew. So a fishbowl on your head and pressure suit gloves on your hands, and no sense of tactile feeling at all. You just had to memorize where everything was in the cockpit, which is the big thing. But we never ever worried about the suit. It always worked. Same with the ejection seat. We never worried about the ejection seat. It always worked. So.
Stan had talked about some of the sensors, and this kind of gives you a little idea on what they were, but as he talked about ASARs, the synthetic aperture radar, about 100-mile look-in capability. It's still around 3-foot resolution, break down either the photo or the radar data. And anyway, once we get the intelligence put all together, it went to the national theaters or up to Washington, D.C. to NSA or DIA. This is the fun part. We get to talk about the missions, all that maintenance stuff for the building of the airplanes behind us. Now we get to go operate it. Let's see. Tom, do you want to talk about the air refueling?
Every single mission involved between 1 and 4, sometimes more air refuelings. You got real good air refuelings. Only because you had to be good. We were totally dependent on the tankers, and I just want to make one point. There are literally thousands of people, both in the SR-71 and also the tankers, including their support staff and everything else, that we could not fly the airplane, just 2 guys flying the airplane. We had all the people at Beale Air Force Base, maintenance, we had the supply people, we had different bases overseas in the U.S., so we had a tremendous amount of support that we depended on. And air refueling was something that became almost second nature, if you will, because it had to be done. The airplane could go a long ways in Mach 3, but we were reliant on the tankers for their support.
Thank you. As he said, we never had to abort a mission because of the tankers. They were always there.
This is a very complicated looking slide, but the real takeaway from this is that we could only go so far without our tanker support, and even on a short flight, 2.5 hours out of Okinawa, for example, we still had to refuel we normally took off with about half fuel load because of the reduced strain on the fuselage, and we would go straight to a tanker and refuel, top off, and then we'd accelerate and go supersonic afterwards. Either come back and land or come back and hit another tanker, and you can then accelerate and go fast, descend, hit another tanker, or land and continue on like that indefinitely, as long as some of the systems in the airplane held, like liquid nitrogen, things like that. But anyway, totally dependent on our tankers. And there's special tankers, KC-135Q models, which are designed for us that separate the fuel and carry our fuel and not intermix with their own fuel. And we had secure ranging on them. We never talked to them until we actually connected with the boom. So
Mildenhall is in East Anglia. The rendition of England right there, it's down in the lower right-hand third of the island. And we would take off and refuel over the North Sea. And then on the map on your right, you can see, most people can understand where Iceland is, a little island out in the middle, and Norway. So we'd almost always fly up around the coast of Norway, and then to the peninsula or the area above Russia where the subpens were kept, Murmansk, and we would turn around up there and come back down, and then quite often we would refuel again, and then we would go in one of two different places. One, to look at, because the German country was still divided into East Germany and West Germany, we would fly in West Germany. We would go into the Baltic, which is kind of like an inland lake there by Denmark, going up near Finland, and turn around. We'd go around the little island that's uniquely named Goat Island. I suppose there's a lot of goats there. And we would look in on all of the satellite countries that the Soviet Union had that were against the edge of the Baltic Sea, and as well as look at part of the Russian area that touched the Baltic Sea, like St. Petersburg. And I forgot to mention that occasionally we would go down into the Mediterranean, which also showed up on that map. And we had a few missions down that way on special occasions. Sorry, Bill.
No, that's right. Enjoy the input. Stan, do you want to talk a little about the Pacific Theater? Locations, I guess, and where our tracks were?
Yeah, one of the things that's kind of interesting about the SR-71 is that we were an Air Force airplane, but our reconnaissance, for the most part, was Army and Navy. And one of the places that we always looked at was DMZ in the area north of South Korea, and looking at North Korea. That was a very common story that we would come, take off out of Canada, go up, and then turn around and come back along the DMZ, and like other sorties we would go south along the Vietnam coast, and then look at the islands. So take a look at some of the islands that were near the Philippines and around in the South China Sea and that sort of area, because there was some conflict there. Spratly Islands, for example, the Chinese had complained. Think that they own them anyway, and they're building up some militarization. So we were trying to figure out what was going on there as well. One sortie we took, we flew. There was actually took a picture of a Chinese destroyer actually shooting at somebody out there in the water. The other place we went was to take a look at the subpens up around on the Kamchatka Peninsula, and that that was a pretty long story, but that was the eastern submarine area that we were taking a look at. And as I might know, just real quickly, is that for about 4 months of the year, or maybe a little longer, when it was really, really dark, during winter, obviously, the only platform that could see what was going on in the submarine areas in Murmansk and around the Kola Peninsula, and also on the Kamchatka Peninsula, was the SR-71. So that was one of the critical things that we were doing before they developed satellites that had the radar capability to see what was going on there. And Okinawa was our home station there in our detachment. And we flew missions out of there from into the Middle East when the Iraq-Iran war was going on. I don't remember how many missions there were, 4 or 5 missions. And those were 11-hour plus sorties that those guys flew on. So that's kind of the coverage of what we did from Okinawa itself.